Hello, everybody. I appreciate the six of you joining. Six people, five different squares. It's going to be a fun time today, but I want to put something out in the open before we dive into this conversation. We are not here at all to debate whether kids belong at breweries. We've seen that thread kind of explode on social media. It seems like once every year over the past like 5 years, and it gets so heated every time, kind of like when you're talking about Untapped ratings. I feel like those conversations go hand in hand. But we're not here to talk about that today. What we are here to talk about is to discuss how we can not only create policies that support parents, but how we can best follow through with action that support these words. I'm really looking forward to diving into this. But first, let's go forward with a round of introductions. Tell everybody who you are, what you do in the industry, and why this topic is important to you. And Betsi, because you are to the right of me, you get to go first.
Great. I am Betsi Good. I am the head kombucha brewer for Four Corners Brewing Company in Dallas, Texas. And this topic is important to me because I have spent my time building my career mostly as a single parent. I have worked for breweries that were not supportive and helpful, and I currently work for a brewery that is very supportive. I'm sitting at home with my 13-year-old in the next room because this was an important topic, and it's not very quiet in my brewery. So it's really important that everybody feel the same support that I feel.
Excellent. Well, I was going to ask you if you've turned your kitchen into a production brewery, but I guess you said
a little bit.
No.
Yes. That's the scare.
I love it. Nancy, always great to see you. And I am so jealous of that beautiful backdrop you have right now. So for everybody who's not watching but listening, tell everybody what's behind you.
It's a lake, and it's real. I'm in Grand County, Colorado right now, and the reception wasn't good down low, so I came to the lake to hang out here. So, and I'm Nancy Trigg. Sorry, I'm the president and chief growth officer for Arryved point of sale. And similar to Betsi, my story started as a single mom. Right, I was a single mom who found myself advocating for myself my entire career. Trying to make sure that I could, take care of my home obligations and my work obligations, and just have made it a commitment since then to advocate for others who might not know how to do it for themselves.
I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and kind of hear about what you do at Arryved to achieve those goals. But next up, Randy and Sindra, I'm very excited to have you both today because, while Craft Beer Professionals is about 99% of our members here in the States, you are in Norway, and you commented on a recent thread that revolved around paid time off, and the response you put out there blew everybody's mind. So I'm really looking forward to your unique perspective. But for everyone who didn't see that comment, please tell them about who both of you are, what you do.
Okay, so I'll start. My name is Sindre. I'm the sales and brand manager of Molo Brew. And if we move aside, this is the outside of our brewery. This is a view outside of the brewery.
It's real.
Yeah, it's the harbor of Ålesund, where we're at. And yeah.
And I'm Randy. I'm our head brewer and production manager. I am American, but I live in Norway, which is wonderful. One of the reasons that we wanted to be involved in this talk is because I've seen the perspective of how parents and even non-parents get treated when it comes to being able to take time for themselves and their personal lives. So I think hopefully we can bring a perspective that joins what Norway does and how Norwegians view the workforce, the work side of the world, and pair that with how brewers pair their view of their work-life workload balance.
No, I'm looking forward to that. And disclaimer, I am also a dad. My almost 2-year-old in the background. So Betsi, just like you, I tried to be in a quiet place, but you hear a little baby screaming. That's Max in the background. But James, it's your turn to tell everybody who you are and why this is important to you.
Yeah, my name is James Moriarty. I'm one of the co-founders and brewers at Urban Brew Labs in Chicago. I run the brewery with my wife and our 3 kids. It's been an interesting year because they're all in elementary school, and we had to host that here at the brewery. But yeah, it's kind of been a challenge balancing family and the brewery needs. over the 9 years that we've been parents. And there's interesting challenges that that get brought up. Like if I'm in the middle of a brew day and there's a family emergency, my hands are tied. It's like, and then the burden gets shifted onto my wife, and then vice versa when she's got appointments around the city, and I have to host the kids at the brewery. It's challenging for us finding a balance, and then it's also it's been interesting for the kids too. I mean, they get dragged into our work environment, which isn't always fun for them, and we're just trying to make it through. But my backdrop. Oops, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
My backdrop is a construction zone right now. I'm single-handedly building a tap room, and that's been an additional fun challenge this year. But we're hoping to open in July. So,
So right now, James, you are strictly production, no tap room just yet?
Correct. Yeah, we've been running a production facility for 3 years now, and all with the desire of opening a tap room. I was waiting on our neighboring tenants to vacate the space, but they were getting delays, and then COVID kind of introduced additional delays, and we finally got a crack at opening up this past October. So it's been a fun 6 or 7 months so far.
I'm sure it'll be fun next few months as well, but good luck getting that tap room open. And Laura, I really appreciate you joining with about 24 hours notice, as it would be very fitting we had someone unable to make this due to parenting needs. So, even when you're hosting a conversation like this, you just want to find the best way to make everybody, happy. But Laura, you're up. Tell everybody who you are and what you do in the industry.
Sure. I'm Laura Dierks. I'm the founder and CEO of Interboro Spirits and Ales in Brooklyn. We're a craft brewery and distillery under one roof. And my backdrop is the top of our warehouse, which is our kind of like glass enclosed greenhouse / office. My interest in this is because I started this business with 3 kids already. And so I've been, sort of working towards that balance and wanting to create an environment for my employees that, balances for them as well. My co-founder has 2 children. We have a couple employees who have kids, and I do want to figure out how to balance it all. Life's too short otherwise.
No, absolutely. And an interesting point that a couple of you have made so far is, and a business, a brewery in particular, isn't just the employees. You as the owners, in many of your cases, want to make sure you're taking care of your mental health as well and spending time with your family. So that's something we'll dive into a little bit. But first, Betsi, I want to begin with you. You mentioned you've been in workplaces that don't do a good job of supporting you and now do a good job of supporting you. I would love to hear about your unfortunate experiences. So that way, we can hear about the challenges that we are facing in a lot of places in our industry.
Okay. A lot of my bad experiences are things that you might not normally think about. Nobody didn't hire me because I had kids, but I did get fired from a job previous to the brewing industry because I had to be out because I was sick, and then my son was sick, and we'd been to the doctor, gave us a couple of days. The notice, I couldn't come back because he still had a fever. I couldn't take him to daycare. And so I was fired because I had to stay at home with my sick kid. That's not okay. And I suspect a lot of people have experienced things like that. And I had a good track record. I was a good worker. There was no reason to go through that. So I think that making sure that parents can take care of their kids should be paramount. And that seems really obvious. And I think requiring doctor's notes when you don't provide health insurance is not the way to go either, And so that's kind of a more obvious thing, but a lot of what I dealt with was, maybe they did let me take time off when he wasn't feeling well, but I was working from home, not being paid for my time. I don't have the same ability to make money and make sure that I can pay my rent and be out with my kid. the absence policies are either non-existent or just not supportive for somebody who's raising a kid, especially somebody who's raising a kid on their own. And then, a lot of it is just in the scheduling. A lot of us are required to work late nights, third shift, swing shifts. And that's really tough when you've got kids around. The changing shifts or the late shifts, it's not only difficult if you're already in the industry, but it's also very exclusionary when you're looking into hiring parents or single parents. There are plenty of breweries that say you got to work on weekends, you've got to work third shift, you've got to do swing shifts. And so people like me aren't able to access the industry when we make rules like that. Sometimes it's necessary in the production setting, and that I understand, but I really think that we could do better.
Absolutely. And Betsi, at that position where you were let go because of your son having doctor's appointments, were there any written policies in place, or were you told anything with regard to your relationship with work and also being a parent?
There were not any written policies in place that I knew of. And it should have been a much more supportive environment because it was kid-centered where I was working then, but they didn't have a written policy in place to deal with those types of absences. But luckily for me, I was able to get to those doctor's appointments in which we diagnosed my son with asthma and realized why he was getting sick so often. So unfortunately, I had to leave a job to get that diagnosis, but now we've got it under control and medicated, and our lives are a lot easier.
I think all of us will probably agree family comes first in the situation. I'm very glad you're at a place where they respect you and your needs.
Oh, absolutely. My son during the pandemic was homeschooled for almost a year, and a lot of that homeschooling was done in the office at the brewery, and he was not only accepted there, but he was absolutely welcomed anytime he needed to come and do his schoolwork and be there. And it is such an incredibly supportive environment.
That's great. And Nancy, I want to bring it to you because you've talked extensively about being a single mom, and you are one of the hardest working people I know. You're always looking to hop in the panel. You're always sharing some new great idea. You're busy. So what are some of the challenges you've faced over your career as being a single mom, and what are some of the frustrations you experienced at past places of employment that didn't support you the way you should be supported?
Well, I'll be honest. I wouldn't say that I had a lot of frustrations. If you've known me for more than 5 minutes, I'm pretty stubborn. And I continually asked for and advocated for what I needed. It started in one of my first jobs with explaining to them why they needed to convert one of the conference rooms into a space for people's kids when they were sick or couldn't go to school for some reason. And my CEO at the time, he thought it was a crazy idea, but he just went along with it. And so we ended up having a little room with a VHS player back in the day, crayons and movies and things like that. And I just found myself kind of constantly asking for that. I knew that I was going to have a lot of time where I couldn't be 100% at work. I didn't have, a co-parent. It was me alone and no family around. So I knew that that was going to be the reality of my life. And so I constantly had to just ask for what I needed. Even, making sure that there was a plan so that I could work from home when necessary at all my jobs. I'll tell you the biggest difficulty is other people's attitudes. It wasn't necessarily that I couldn't get what I needed from work. It was the constant eye rolls from people, side comments from folks at the office, why does she get to go home? Questions about my commitment, things like that, that came from other people I worked with. And I think that's the stuff that sometimes doesn't get talked about, right? Your company might have the best policy, but if you're getting attitude from your coworkers that make you feel less than, that's also a very unsupportive environment.
No, that's a great point. It's something we're going to dive into in just a little bit. Does anybody have any, past experience they would like to share before we dive into the next talking point?
I'd like to have one thing on this. So from a non-parent's perspective, I love the fact that you brought up that it's a big deal when you have colleagues looking at you like you're not putting in the most effort, because I see that with a lot of the colleagues in our restaurant side of our brew pub. And when it comes to my staff in the brewery, I think it's a fundamental a fundamental value to make sure that anybody with a child or anybody that has something going on with their family outside of work has the support from their team, because they'll translate that back when they are working immediately, and they tend to work harder if you're giving them what they need support wise.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Randy. It starts at the top and it's going to work its way down, and everybody's going to kind of represent that positive company culture we're going to dive into shortly. But one question I want to ask everybody here is, I think the first thing we need to talk about is just simply understanding parents' needs. You can't simply say we want to support parents in the workplace. We need to understand what we can do to support them. So for everyone here who is a parent, what are your top couple needs, or any talking points you'd like to throw out there, the things that are important to you when looking for a place to work, or something you want to provide for your employees?
I think
Laura, you're on mute.
Oh, go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. The two phrases of COVID, what day is it? And you're on mute.
Absolutely.
So I was going to go back to the culture thing you were talking about, is that, you embed in the culture that part of all of what management does.
Laura, I think you might have froze. That's number 3 thing you've heard on Zoom calls the past 18 months.
Just that open question will help the situation. Did you hear any of that?
Unfortunately, we didn't. You went out for a moment there. All we heard was help the situation. But your audio looks good now, if you'd like to try to take 2.
The key is really that you create the open environment. Always have your management team asking, what else can we do to help you do your job well, right? So that question is always being asked, and that may be, I've got to take my kid to a number of doctor's appointments. How can you help me get my work done around that? Whatever it is, COVID hit, I don't have any childcare. All that open communication provides that environment that will allow parents to be able to speak up and say what they need, as well as
Laura, over the past year, I think everybody's seen the value of check-ins with your employees, with your friends, everyone in your life, just a simple text or phone call or Zoom, just seeing how they're doing. When you check in with your employees at Interboro, are there any certain questions you're regularly asking them, or what have been their responses to how you can best support them, one, through a pandemic, but also, as parents?
Well, for one, my check-ins are very structured, and I always ask the question of what's keeping you up at night, what's bothering you, what's on your mind, and leave it that open. It may be that, this thing is going on that really is, just keeping me stressed. It may not be related to work. Through COVID, those questions and often they'd tell me more about that has helped my employees tell me what they need. During COVID, I actually babysitting some kids in the office, so that my warehouse guys is key to getting things done.
So it sounds like being flexible is extremely important.
Definitely.
Now, James, I know you also have, did you say 3 children?
Yes. Yep.
Do you have any employees as well, or is it just you and your family?
Nope. We have 3 members that have fairly large families. So during, especially this year, really kind of wanted to lead by example, but also not be hypocritical in that, my kids are here at the brewery, but that was an open invitation for everyone who needed that. And in fact, at times we have we had a neighbor who's a substitute teacher who was out of work during COVID. So she offered to kind of act as like a substitute teacher here at the brewery. And which is great because it alleviated a lot of stress off of my kids and myself and my wife, because we couldn't always drop what we were doing and help them with, an assignment in the middle of the day, or whatever their challenges were. And it was kind of a unique experience for sure. But I guess my big thing, and it's touching on what Nancy brought up, is, I'm in this, and like I want to set the tone at the brewery that life happens. So we can't stigmatize the employees who have family needs that don't always come up at the most convenient times. That we need to be respectful and flexible. And I think a lot of that can do be on my shoulders going forward with cross training, so that we can pick up each other's ball and keep moving. Because I had an employee who had one of his sons were in the hospital for just a little over a month. He just had a kind of an allergic reaction that no one knew what the source was, and obviously that employee was committed to being at his kid's bedside throughout that period and the care afterwards. And we had to be flexible around that and be respectful, because I never know when I'm going to be that person asking the same tomorrow. And then we do have employees who don't have families, and but they're around all of our families, so they know, hey, like we're not just asking for time off. There's real struggles that we have to deal with, and they're going to have their own struggles. So we just got to be respectful of each other's time, whether at the workplace or at home.
James, that's a great point, because this conversation is obviously about supporting parents in the workplace, but we want to support all of our employees. And discussing things like paid time off and just other things when people have emergencies isn't just about those who have children. So that's a great point you had there. One thing I'd like to touch on, you mentioned you brought a substitute teacher in. So you essentially had a school/daycare, whatever you want to call it, at your production facility. Is that something that's realistic to keep longer than just the pandemic? And how long did you keep it going? And is this something that you think would work for other tap rooms?
We were kind of worried about it at first, because we weren't sure if we were touching on some legal territories, I guess. Because we did have someone more or less watching kids, without proper background checks, I guess. But she is a school teacher, so we took some assumptions. But so here in Chicago, we were shut down for just over a year. I think my kids went back to school 4 days a week. I think a week after the 1 year anniversary of school getting shut down. And so at the start of the school year, there was a lot of unknowns. We didn't know if we were ever going to go back. We had this hybrid model being floated, but City of Chicago, the teachers union was opposed to it. So the remote schooling was just dragged on and on and on. And, and as such, that substitute teacher, she was left unemployed. So I don't think it's going to be something long-term that we're going to be able to support. But that being said, we're still only back to school 4 days a week. So there is that fifth day for what's the date? Another 12 days. We're still hosting the kids on Wednesdays at the brewery. But no, I think if anything, this year just kind of really put the focus on, like, wow, like there are things out of our control that we have to respond to, and I don't think I would have ever written a policy where we would have allowed for homeschooling at the brewery, but necessity dictated that, and we adapted.
You had to make it work. That's right.
And honestly, it was great for me because it took the stress off of like not being home. My kids were here at the brewery. It was fun, and it just brought a lot of tension down. So I'm appreciative of that, and actually I kind of miss it. But I'm glad they're with their friends now. So
excellent. Thanks for sharing that, Nancy. I like to kind of shift the question to you. How do you best understand your staff's needs at Arryved, and how do you ask them what you can do best for them? Do you have a certain structured set of questions? How are you checking in, or how are you making sure you're providing the support they need?
So checking in and talking to our staff is essentially part of our DNA. We have made that part of our culture from day one, reminding our staff that they're humans first and employees second. It's just part of our language to have those conversations. We have a lot of young and first-time parents, and we do offer paid leave for folks that are having children. And one of the things that I do when people come back for the first time after just having a child is I explain to them that there are going to be days they hate being here. There are going to be times where every part of their heart is somewhere else. And there's going to be days that they struggle with their job. And that we know that, and that they're not alone in that that's a normal part of becoming a parent. So we try and kind of set that tone from day one. We also, when someone's about to go on leave, we talk to our staff that's in their team and affected about how we're all going to have to step in and cover, and what that looks like, and what support means in that situation. So it's a part of the conversation on a regular basis, and something I think we all really value. And that's not, again, to James's point, that's not just for parents, right? That's for everyone. We really try and make sure people feel heard and recognized as humans first.
Now, Randy and Sindra, I like to kind of talk to you both for a moment, because you first caught my attention with your comment on a CVP thread about paid time off. Share a little bit about the policy on paid time off and a few of the perks at your brewery.
I'll take this if that's okay. Yeah. So in Norway, we have kind of a set structure of legal requirements where people are entitled to take up to 5 weeks off per year. And then you can also, that doesn't include sick time, and if there's a pandemic or if there's an emergency. So those things are structured, and we set things up around. But it's kind of cut and dry. People get 5 weeks off. If they need more, then it's up to them to discuss why and how that works with us. So
is that paid time off, Randy, or is that just time off?
It's structured so that part of your paycheck goes into a fund for the whole year. So you get an untaxed portion of your annual salary in July?
Yeah, June,
July.
Yeah.
So you actually get a larger paycheck, and then you also get time off. So I believe our company, we pay 11% of whatever that money is on top of their vacation pay or holiday pay. That way that our staff, when they do have time off, they're not sitting there without money or money in the bank. They can actually go do something or spend it on their kids or spend it on their families. So it's just integrated, and we work around it.
I absolutely love that. And that's a government policy, correct?
it's a government policy, and we do kind of bring it up one step because we're still small enough to where we can. Where if for any reason you do need to take more time off, let's say you've got a parent coming from another country into town, or you've got something going on with your kids' schools, then as long as I know within a month, I can organize it perfectly. If it's within a month and it's something I'm not aware of and on short notice, then I'll do my best to get you the time available. But sometimes I can't say yes all the time. I try to.
And are these policies you have written in some sort of handbook that employees have access to, or how is your staff made aware of all these policies in place?
Well, some of them are online, so everybody in Norway kind of understands that if there is some sort of what's the word for it? Something you're entitled to.
Yeah.
You can go on to, there's a government department that shows you all your rights. And then also we have a big booklet with all of those printed out in it and all of our SOPs for anything that is not included that we add on top. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing all that. And for everybody here in the States, go ahead, Nancy.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think this has come up twice now, that having your policies, whatever they are, written down is super important. I think people tend to see things from their own perspective and might see something as being, in the favor of someone else more than themselves if the policy isn't clear and written. And so to avoid sort of some of that hard feelings in the workplace, having your policies written is super important, whatever they are.
No, I couldn't agree more. And speaking of written policies, well, Laura, go ahead.
I was just going to say that also then creates a transparency around the fact that parents aren't getting more than other people, right? Like that they are, you have a certain amount of paid time off and they're taking paid time off for whatever needs they have, and that everyone else has availability of that paid time off as well. So it's not, oh, they get more time off. No, they get the same time off that you do, and so it's just a matter of how people are using it. It helps, sort of take out some of the coworker stuff that you were talking about, Nancy, about people feeling like, oh, somebody gets more than somebody else. And that's all about it being written.
And Laura, what type of policies do you have written, just like a brief overview, and how can employees access them? Is it online? Are they given a handbook? What type of medium are they provided?
They're given a handbook. It's actually part of the onboarding process in our company. So when you accept your formal offer, it's through our payroll system. The next thing is that you put in all your information yourself and you're presented with the documents there. So the handbooks are there, our anti-sexual harassment policy is there, our all the different things are there for you to review and actually sign off that you've looked at them. I try to make sure that each year that we're kind of trying to review it and make sure that we talk about it. We have all hands meetings once a month, and so I try to make sure that anything at all there that comes up around policies is at least mentioned and discussed, and I reiterate that the handbook is available to everybody online. Please make sure you take a look at it. I know it's easy to click through and for people to not think they need to read it, but it's key. You just keep talking about it. Keep talking about that it's written down. We have paid time off policies there. We have holiday policies there. I just was looking at the holiday policies around Memorial Day for somebody who doesn't have Mondays as their regular work day. What happens with them, whether they're part-time or full-time? There's a lot of ins and outs of it, right? And you're going to get some of it and it's going to be a work in progress, and you're going to keep going, well, in this case, it's this, that, and the other thing. And then you write it down and you make sure that you're being consistent with all of your employees, whether they're parents or not. It's really critical. It's really critical.
You brought up some other really good points. So we've already talked about having things written down, but also make sure everyone's aware of these policies and reminded about these policies. But you also brought up the point that, whether someone's a parent or not, I imagine all of your policies still apply to them in some way. Do you have any policies specific for parents, or like you mentioned, do all these policies, whether regarding paid time off, vacations, whatever it may be, do they apply to everyone at your company?
They apply to everybody in the company. I mean, I think for fairness sake, it's important, like I was saying too, to make sure that everybody feels like they're getting the same or access to the same, sort of benefits, right? Whether it be that you have something else in your life that takes a lot of time. It could even be, caring for your parents or your pets or whatever it is. I mean, it's hard to compare kids to pets, but you see where I'm going. It really is like, you do have to sort of provide for people to have the life that they choose, right? If they're choosing to have children or not, it's super important. In New York State, there's a lot of parental leave policies that are part of state law now, and New York City has, and that's important to make sure that you're following all of what your local, jurisdiction has in place, and even looking at what other jurisdictions are doing. I think New York and California are often ahead of other places, and trying to see what, people have put a lot of thought and care into crafting these parental leave policies. And, you don't have to create things from scratch. You can take a look at what's already out there in the public domain. The New York State Legislature spent all this time looking at parental leave. The city council spent a lot of time looking at it. Taking those things in, not only as a company to make sure that you're honoring what your sort of local government is saying that you need to honor, but also just looking at, well, what's there that you should take into account. We have policies around part-time employees that were taken from looking at what part-time employees get and don't get. It's hard when you have different jobs and are spread across multiple companies. Can you get a day off when you're working 2 days here and 2 days there? Well, it's hard, right? Because you're earning leave in both those places, but it doesn't combine. So I've tried to look at those things and think about what kind of spirit I want to have in our policies and how does it help people.
That's fantastic insight there. And Betsi, I'd like to throw it over to you, because you've talked about places you have not enjoyed working, and now you absolutely love working for Four Corners because of their policies. Can you speak on some of the policies that you really appreciate them having in place?
I appreciate hearing about y'all and the fact that you make sure to incorporate these policies, not only for parents, but for anybody, for leave, if you need a mental health leave or a day. I think that's incredibly important. Four Corners, my kid's too old to have utilized this, but they have a parental leave policy that applies to any parent who has a new child, either through birth or adoption. So if somebody were to have a child, they get 3 months paid leave, and they can take it at different times. They don't have to take it all at once. So there's somebody working there that had a baby that got to take 6 weeks off and help his partner when the baby was new, and then come back to work and then take more time off later. And I think that's a really neat policy, being able to take that leave. And that's something that we definitely don't take for granted. It's not mandated. There are no laws in Texas that say that they have to give any leave or paid leave, other than 6 weeks unpaid is kind of our national standard, which is it's not okay. I went back to work when my son was 6 weeks old. It's too soon. It sucks. So just being in an environment where they voluntarily make these arrangements for parents, not only birth parents, but adoptive parents too, I think is really important. And that kind of translates into the company culture as well. I worked in an environment where, under one head brewer, I was scheduled what I needed to make sure to take care of my kid. And the next head brewer was scheduling me on school nights until midnight as a single parent. And it was incredibly difficult and really hard. That was probably one of the most stressful years of my life, but I was dedicated to being a brewer and to staying in the industry and making it work. And they forced me to put my job first instead of my son first. And it's not okay. But I'm really lucky to be in an environment now, and I've worked my way to head brewer. And when we hire people who are parents, especially, not only parents, but I will bend over backwards to make sure that they can pick their kid up from school and go to their kindergarten graduations. And I will always, always be supportive and aggressively supportive because of what I went through to get where I am.
And Betsi, what are your best recommendations for employees speaking with their managers and ownership about their needs? Because sometimes these conversations can be awkward and uncomfortable out of, fear of losing your job, fear of not getting the hours. What are the best approaches you recommend for an employee of a company to talk to the uppers about, their needs?
What works for me at Four Corners, and obviously it's easier because the environment is so supportive and positive, but just making sure to give my boss plenty of notice when I've got something going on. I'm not just a head brewer, I'm also a baseball coach, and I take my son to track meets, which last all day on a hot Saturday, if you're not familiar. I am on the board of his baseball association and the 10U commissioner. I am the chapter leader for the Pink Boots Society of North Texas. I wear a lot of hats and I need a lot of time. And I'm sitting here doing this interview from home, so you can see how well I'm supported. We talked, Andrew, and you invited me to be on this panel. And the first thing I did was put it on the calendar, tell my boss what it was and why it was important to me. And he was very supportive in making sure that I had the time to do this and everything that I do. He's very supportive in making sure I've got that time, and he will bend over backwards for me to make sure that I can schedule what I need to do around the other things that are important to me in my life and create this balance. So I think communication, as we were talking about earlier, just as soon as possible and as clearly as possible is really helpful in making sure that I've got the time that I need to do these things. And as I was listing off all the things that I do, my 13-year-old on the couch said, "Thank you."
No, that thank you is really important because appreciation goes a long way. And it's not just appreciation from your bosses and everyone else at the brewery that can say, "Hey, Betsi, you're doing a great job," or whatever they might throw your way. That's positive reinforcement. But also, I think your family appreciates it too. When you're able to take time away from your place of employment, they appreciate having time around you. And I'm sure your son has appreciated that time with you. And I know, while I work for myself, I've enjoyed the opportunities to spend little moments with my son growing up. So it's been a weird year, and I think appreciating parents' time to do their job at work in unique ways and schedule accordingly, but also give them the proper time to have the mental health break with their family is extremely important, because a happy employee, I think, is going to be a much better employee.
Absolutely. I
or
work
person
as
in
hard as
general.
humanly possible because I am supported, and it feels good to be supported, and it feels good to use that energy to support the people that are doing right by me.
And for everyone today, we've already talked a lot about company culture. And Nancy, I think you were the one who mentioned it earlier about, employees who might not be parents just rolling their eyes when a parent gets to, rush off for, a doctor's appointment or their kid's track meet. For everybody here, Nancy, we'll start with you. How have you found it best to encourage all staff to get behind a family-friendly culture?
Well, I'll start with, we hire great people who I think just, at their core kind of have that service mentality, and that service mentality extends to each other and to our team and to our staff. So culture is part of our interviewing. We don't just interview for skills, we interview for that sort of, service and kindness DNA. So, when I talk about that, I'll be honest, I'm not talking about our current group. I'm talking about previous companies where I've worked, where I've seen that. And in the companies where I experienced that myself, sorry guys, my dog's about to run up here, so things are going to get weird. The places where I've experienced it myself, it's been fed by leadership not caring and not talking about it. Right? It's when it's not talked about that it becomes an issue. And if you just sort of keep it on the forefront, I think, most employees anywhere are good people and are going to step into it.
And Randy, I'd like to pass it over to you because you don't have any children, correct?
No, I have a cat.
You have a cat, Andy has a dog, I've got 2 dogs. You know, we're parents of some different kind. But, you know, obviously, you know, this is important to you as well, being a non-parent. So what Nancy talked about just now is creating that culture where even the non-parents believe in this. Why are you passionate about this topic?
A big reason is because my lead brewer, he's got a gorgeous little daughter, and we work with it day to day. So every time anything happens, she comes up. And so one of the things that I've learned over the last 2.5 years now working with him, is that not only Norwegian culture says that family comes first, but also just to see how when he's with his daughter more, he is a better worker. He's just a better person to be around. It creates this awesome culture of almost oneness. And so I feel it. I feel how when I'm allowing my teammates to have the time they need, and I'm working to make sure that they don't even have to ask, they know that they've got it, then it makes me feel better as a manager, but also it creates a better environment overall. And I think one of the key terms that Betsi said and Laura said is communication is so clutch in this. Just talking, making sure that everybody's on the same page and constantly talking. It allows for there never to be any curveballs that aren't handleable from a managerial stage, or position. So I think that, in my opinion, this brewery is kind of my livelihood, but it's also my life. And so if I can treat my teammates like they're my family, they'll work for me like this brewery is their life as well, so to speak, I guess.
No, that's great insight there. James, is there something you want to add?
No.
Oh, sorry. No. I thought you were muted. Well, I mean, we've talked a lot about the culture. We talked about the policies. And one really important thing here is not just having the policies in place, but actively enforcing them. I think that needs to be said again. You've got to stand by your policies if you want to create that culture. But when it comes to supporting these parents, a lot of it has to do with what they're paid and making it possible that a parent could potentially, you know, even afford to send their child to daycare rather than, you know, the 2 parents, one parent having to decide to not work any longer. How do you handle situations like this? And how do you make sure you pay your employees, especially parents with regards to this conversation, enough to be able to be successful parents?
I guess, can I chime in on that one?
Absolutely.
All right. I recently had to go through this just a couple weeks ago, where I haven't people. Man, I'm getting feedback. I'm hearing myself. So I had an employee who had to take on a daycare that was just beyond his financial means, and so I had to bump his pay to help offset some of that daycare costs. And you know, as a really small, you know, starting up brewery, I mean, that's really tough on us. But I think that value comes back to us because now he doesn't have this financial burden that he had to incur, and just due to limited availability for daycare right now. So yeah, we bumped up his pay, and you know, I think his work attitude just reflects that, and I do worry that we're sending the wrong message to the non-parents that, you know, it's like you don't have this additional burden, so therefore we can keep you at a lower pay rate. And honestly, like, I mean, we don't have a single employee at the state's minimum wage. Everyone's above that, and honestly, like, if I can, you know, shed our profits, you know, towards salaries, I'll do that. You know, this is a tough industry to raise a family in because there's not a lot of money in it. You know, so every little penny that we can help contribute towards someone's real financial needs, I'm more than happy to do that. It's just we are working on formalizing policies now that we're hiring a bunch of new employees, but so I do got to watch out that we're not just inflating our payroll just for the sake of inflating that payroll, but he's a really valuable team member that I just couldn't afford to have him leave due to his unavailability. So that was just a financial decision that was easy to make.
And James, I think by paying that employee a greater living wage, you're also, increasing the likelihood he's going to be able to stick around at your company, which means you're not going to have to hire someone new to train for the exact same position. And I'm sure we've all read articles online about, however many $1,000s it says costs you to train a new employee. So I think, by investing in your current staff, you're investing in yourself long term as well.
Oh, absolutely. The impact is immediate. He definitely feels more valued. So, his performance is just that much more. And that was kind of an unforeseen, welcomed side effect. But it's the cost of doing business, I guess.
And also, with regard to, the cost of doing business, great transition for what I would like to go into next. Having these policies in place doesn't just need to be large breweries, putting out a ton of barrels. What are all of your suggestions for even a small startup brewery who wants to make sure they can either pay someone a higher wage, offer certain benefits, create that in their culture? What general recommendations do you all give for even the nanoest of breweries the ability to succeed with supporting their parents? This is a rat race. Nancy, I think you're up. You win.
Sorry. It's just a quick one, and then I'll let Betsi go. Being flexible with your hours. It goes such a long way with families. If there's any way that you can flex your hours or adjust shifts to accommodate, it's a game changer. Even if you can't pay a lot, that's a big deal.
That's a really good point, Nancy. And what I was going to say was, if you are big enough to have a front of house staff, if you have people that are interested in learning to brew or even keg or take cellar readings, having more people trained to help fill in if somebody needs to take a mental health day or parental leave. I was lucky enough at a small brew pub to be able to go to GABF because the first head brewer there had trained several of the servers and bartenders who were interested, and a friend was able to come in and take cellar readings and look after our beers so that we could go to GABF, and that was really invaluable. I learned a lot of things while I was there. I'm a nerd and I liked the classes more than the beer tastings, but I got this great educational experience because the first head brewer, Brian Burton, thank you, took the time to train more staff so that we could have support in our educational experience. That was pretty cool.
I think that ties back into hiring, because you want to hire a team who's willing to step in and do everything, because there's so many jobs we probably all had our entire lives where you get hired to do one thing and then get forced to do something else. However, if you get hired with the expectation that we want to train you, we want to give you the skills to also do these other aspects of our companies, I think it's framing it in a different manner.
I think I'd go back to the communication thing too, even with the smallest teams, figuring out how to make sure you're prioritizing as leadership what your staff wants, and building in like a long-term thinking into it. If you can provide benefits in the way of like, here are a few different benefits that you might want to take advantage of, and provide some funding towards just in general, right? Not any specific thing. If somebody wants a gym membership or somebody wants money to go to GABF, that kind of thing. Trying to think long-term about it, how you're going to support everyone with all their needs is it's certainly what I've been thinking about. And even as you get bigger, it's still very hard to fund everything. Not easy to do. But looking at everybody and looking at everybody's needs and trying to make the best scenario so everybody can get a little bit of what they'd like is what I've been aiming at.
No, one thing I want to talk about as we want. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, James.
No, I mean, the one benefit that not only do my wife and I need, but like every single employee, is health insurance. And unfortunately, we're just so small that we just don't have the buying power for affordable plans. So I've been working with our local Chamber of Commerce for a year and a half now, trying to set up kind of a group buy-in to bring that rate down, and to be able to provide health insurance. But until more people buy into that group, it's untouchable. And that would not me. I don't know how to afford that. We're at about 1,500 barrels annually right now, and there's just not enough meat on the bone to cover that expense. And I'd love to, explore more options as to how to get that to be a cheaper option for us. But right now, the Chamber of Commerce has been our best ally towards achieving that goal.
I think it's great you're just looking for options and you're reaching out to people like the Chamber of Commerce. Or what are your thoughts?
At the risk of going down this path, the people in this conference who actually have the power to do this is Norway, right? How a small business with what a country could do if they chose to. It's very difficult. Putting the burden on small business owners is really the crux of the problem, right? How do we provide childcare as a business of 15 to 20 people? How do we provide health care? These are country problems, and yet we're talking about it like it's problems we can solve. They're very difficult to solve at this scale, or near impossible to solve at this scale. And that's a challenge.
You are 100% right. And that's why I wanted our friends over in Norway to join us today to show us how great things can be. And it's like life goals over there. Not only do I want to see that beautiful view, but I want all the benefits that you're offering.
I think one of the things we've been discussing, you can hear us kind of chatting on the side. We've been discussing how lovely it is to live in a country where we as a society have designed things so that, with multi-policy or multi-party aside, to push our society all together forward in a positive way. So it's interesting to hear about some of the struggles and remember working with people that had some of these struggles back in the United States. And it's interesting to hear. And I feel super blessed to be able to live in a country where the people have come together and decided this is what's beneficial for everybody, and then done things, not just talked about it, but actually made decisions and done things to change things for the better. So I feel really blessed.
Yeah, I like living here.
Yeah. You two absolutely nailed it. And I think that's a good point to finish up on, because when you can create the policy, put it into action, make everybody aware, keep your employees happy, and it goes back to something Betsi mentioned earlier. It gives everyone better access to opportunity. As the single parent, you're not having to choose between your child and your dream job. You're able to make it work. You're able to be flexible. You're able to love your staff because they believe in everything and they believe in you. And the company believes in just creating that ultimate goal as a team. And I absolutely love the insight all five of you put in today. I'm trying to count heads. It's 6 of you now. You confused me having only 5 squares there. But this has been a fun conversation. It's a conversation we need to keep having. So everyone listening, whether you're at a brewery small or large, I mean, I think find the right approach to talk to your team about what's important to you, whether you're a parent or non-parent. And they should want to support you. And at the end of the day, it's going to benefit everyone involved, from the mental health aspect of it to just the success of the overall business. So Betsi, Nancy, Sindra, Randy, James, and Laura, thank you all for joining today. And I look forward to sharing that beer before too long, ideally on a beautiful lake like Nancy or in the country of Norway, like our friends over there. So thank you all for joining today, and talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Bye, everybody.
Ha det bra.